Can you believe it? A mother hid the bodies of 4 newborns in her closet for 20 years. The house reeked with a nauseating stench, so bad that neighbors kept their doors shut, but no one dared to ask why. The bodies were wrapped in plastic bags, hidden behind piles of old clothes. Every day, this woman continued her life as if nothing had happened. It sounds like fiction, but this is a true story that took place in England in 2019. The case shook the entire nation. Everyone asked the same questions. How could a mother be so heartless? What was her real motive? And how could this secret remain buried for 2 decades without anyone knowing? This story will send shivers down your spine. But before we dive in, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any more chilling mysteries. And the central figure of this story is Bernadette Quirk. She was born in 1955 in St. Helens, Merseyside, a peaceful suburban town in England. Bernadette grew up in a poor working-class family with a strict mother, an absent father, and a childhood lacking in love and affection. As a teenager, Bernadette started showing signs of rebellion. She frequently skipped school, wandered the streets, hung out with delinquents, and indulged in wild nights of drinking and smoking. As she entered adulthood, Bernadette lived an aimless life. She had no stable job, no clear direction, and was only interested in a reckless, hedonistic lifestyle. In 1973, at the age of 18, Bernadette entered her first serious relationship with an older man, a factory worker. But the marriage lasted less than 2 years. After the failed marriage, she continued engaging in fleeting, nameless relationships. Men came and went, none staying for long, and this led to a chain of consequences. Between the late 1970s and early 1980s, Bernadette became pregnant multiple times. But here's the strange thing: no one knew who the fathers were. Neighbors speculated that she was involved with multiple men at the same time, but no one knew exactly who she was dating. And no one knew that she had been pregnant 4 times without ever going to a hospital. Years later, when police reopened the case, they discovered a shocking truth. Bernadette had visited the hospital at least 4 times for postpartum complications, but there were no records of the babies. House number 66 on Harlow Street, where Bernadette Quirk lived, not only contained the corpses of 4 newborns, but was also the place where her 2 daughters, Joanne and her younger sister, grew up without ever knowing that they had deceased siblings hidden within those very walls. Joanne Quirk was born in 1976, the first daughter of Bernadette. She grew up never knowing who her father was, because her mother never revealed his identity. 4 years later, in 1980, Bernadette gave birth to another daughter, but once again, the father's identity remained a mystery. Bernadette Quirk was unlike any other mother in the neighborhood. She did not raise her children the way a normal mother would. Neighbors recalled that Bernadette rarely cared for her daughters. Instead, she spent most of her time drinking, partying, and engaging in numerous relationships with unknown men. Joanne and her sister were often neglected, living in a filthy, chaotic house where the stench was so overwhelming that it clung to every wall. But the most terrifying part was that they never understood why. As a child, Joanne repeatedly asked her mother about the strange smell in their home, but Bernadette always dismissed her concerns, giving vague excuses like, "It's just the old plumbing," or "It's the smell of rotten food in the kitchen." Joanne always felt that something was off about their house, but she could never pinpoint what it was. She assumed it was just her mother's careless lifestyle, never realizing that it was the evidence of a horrifying crime. Even the neighbors noticed the overwhelming stench coming from the house, but because Bernadette was always drunk and seemed mentally unstable, no one wanted to get involved. Years later, after escaping the nightmare of her childhood, Joanne wrote a book titled Silent Sisters, a chilling memoir of the horrors she endured growing up. She described her experience living with her mother in a house that was nothing short of hell, plagued with nightmares beyond imagination. Speaking to the son, Jo.e.n revealed that their house was so filthy and disgusting that she couldn't even recognize what color the floor was. Garbage and plastic bags piled from floor to ceiling. Animal feces covered the floors. Maggots crawled everywhere. Her younger sister's dirty diapers had been left in the house for years, emitting a stench so unbearable that it was nearly impossible to breathe. But all of this was nothing compared to the horrors she had yet to discover. Jo.e.n and her siblings endured unspeakable nightmares every time they helped their mother move houses. She recalled that their fridge had broken down, but her mother still kept food inside it, allowing it to rot until it was unrecognizable. The washing machine had stopped working years ago, but dirty clothes were still left inside it, decomposing and reeking. The bathroom was completely unusable because trash bags were stacked from the floor to the ceiling, blocking the entrance. Jo.e.n tried her best to clean the house, but no matter how much she cleaned, the mess and filth always returned. She took care of herself and raised her two younger siblings, a boy and a girl, all on her own. Her mother didn't care. Bernadette Quirk continued to drown in her chaotic life, completely ignoring the state of her home and the well-being of her children. One day, while cleaning out a pile of old garbage bags, Jo.e.n found a handwritten letter with the words, "Don't live like this anymore." She had no idea who had written it, but she guessed it was from one of the men her mother had been involved with, perhaps the only one who had ever tried to help her escape this life. In 1998, the horrifying truth was revealed for the first time when Jo.e.n's younger sister, Kath, who was 16 at the time, discovered a red container inside their mother's closet after noticing an unbearable stench coming from it. At first, Kath thought it was just a dead rat or a forgotten bag of rotten food, but what she found inside was a nightmare she would never forget for the rest of her life. What terrified my sister the most was the number of insects crawling around the container, Jo.e.n later recalled. Kath wrinkled her nose as the putrid smell filled her lungs, but she forced herself to move closer. She hesitantly opened the lid, trying to peek inside. At that moment, she felt as if hundreds of eyes were staring at her from the darkness. Kath reached inside the container and instantly recoiled in horror. She had felt something soft but ice cold, and its shape was disturbingly round like a human head. Her entire body froze. Her heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe what she had just touched. Overcome with terror, she bolted out of the room, shaking as she grabbed the phone to call Jo.e.n. "Oh my God, I found something. It feels like a human head." Kath's voice trembled over the phone. Jo.e.n, who was 26 at the time, thought her sister was hallucinating or overreacting. She tried to calm her down, insisting that it couldn't possibly be true. But Kath was inconsolable. She kept repeating that whatever was inside the container looked like a small body wrapped in plastic. Eventually, Jo.e.n decided to go back home and see for herself. When she arrived, she saw Kath standing frozen next to the red container, her eyes filled with sheer terror. Jo.e.n stepped forward, bent down, and hesitantly opened the lid. Instantly, an overpowering stench of decomposition hit her like a wall, making her stomach churn as if she were about to vomit. But the real shock was yet to come. Between the layers of old plastic bags, a tiny body emerged, a long-deceased newborn, carefully placed inside a plastic wrap. Jo.e.n couldn't believe what she was seeing. For years, she had convinced herself that her mother was just mentally unstable. But now, the horrifying truth was staring her in the face, undeniable and inescapable. After the initial shock, Jo.e.n knew she could no longer avoid the truth. She had to confront her mother. She demanded answers from Bernadette about the identity of the body. At first, Bernadette was silent, her eyes avoiding Jo.e.n's gaze. But after a few moments, she let out a sigh and lowered her head in admission. The baby's name was Helen. She died right after birth. At that moment, Neither of them argued. They simply made the decision to bury the child. The next day, Jo.e.n personally buried her baby sister. She chose a respectful spot in the cemetery, right next to the grave of Nana Winnie, her grandmother, along with her Uncle Bernard and Jo.e.n's own son, John, who had tragically died just 30 minutes after birth. As the final handful of dirt covered the tiny coffin, Jo.e.n felt like she had done the right thing. But the feeling of peace didn't last long. In the days that followed, she desperately tried to erase the haunting memory from her mind, but the image of Helen's tiny body kept resurfacing every time she saw a little girl on the street. Years later, her sister Kath made another horrifying discovery. She found the red container once again inside their mother's closet. The moment Kath discovered it, Bernadette panicked. She ran into the room, slammed the closet door shut, and screamed, "Don't touch it!" By this time, Kath was older and more suspicious of what might be inside. She immediately called Jo.e.n and told her to come home. Once again, the terrifying red container stood before them. But this time, Jo.e.n was no longer the naive girl she once was. She opened the lid, and what she saw inside made her stomach drop. Inside, there wasn't just one body. The sickening smell of decomposed flesh mixed with air freshener was so strong that she had to cover her nose, but nothing could erase the horrifying truth that lay before her. It wasn't just Helen. It wasn't just one. There were at least 3 more infant bodies, wrapped in plastic and stuffed inside the container. Without hesitation, Jo.e.n confided in a close family friend and told them everything she had discovered. The friend fell silent for a moment and then picked up the phone. She stepped into the hallway and made the phone call that changed my life forever, Jo.e.n later wrote in her book. A few hours later, the police arrived. They listened as Jo.e.n explained everything about Helen, the burial, and the discovery of the red container. But just as she thought the nightmare was ending, everything took a shocking turn. Jo.e.n, the woman who had buried her baby sister out of love, was arrested. The police suspected that she was involved in the crime. She, the one who had buried one of the infants, was now being treated as a suspect. The police officers told Jo.e.n that they had found 3 more bodies inside the red container. Forensic doctors conducted an examination on the remains found in the container. All of them were full-term infants. Why hadn't she realized it sooner? Why, after all these years, had she accepted living in that house without ever questioning the horrific stench that clung to every corner? Even now, I still don't know why, Jo.e.n admitted. I didn't pay attention to that strange smell in the house, that awful, indescribable smell. I had never known a stench like that before. Just when Jo.e.n thought nothing could horrify her more, the most devastating truth hit her. During the investigation, Jo.e.n accidentally discovered something chilling. One of the fathers of the infants, hidden in the container, was none other than her longtime partner. That meant the baby was not only her half-sibling, but also the child of the man she had trusted the most. The truth felt like a dagger to Jo.e.n's heart. She had spent years living with this man, sharing a life with him, but she had no idea that he had fathered a child with her own mother. A wave of pain crashed over her, part betrayal, part sheer disgust. Jo.e.n collapsed, feeling as if her entire life had been a lie. 7 months after her arrest, Jo.e.n was finally exonerated. The police cleared her of any suspicion, as there was no evidence linking her to the deaths of the newborns. In December 2010, Bernadette Quirk finally stood trial at Liverpool Crown Court. Before the stunned courtroom, she admitted to concealing the births and hiding the bodies for 2 decades. The court revealed that for 20 years, Bernadette had used air fresheners to mask the stench of the decomposing remains in her closet. The infants had been born between 1985 and 1995. Bernadette excused her actions, claiming that she had been drinking heavily at the time and couldn't remember the events clearly. Her lawyer attempted to defend her, stating that the pregnancies had occurred during a period of crisis for her as a mother. She cannot fully explain what happened during that time in her life, the attorney argued. Jo.e.n refused to accept this excuse. Whether her mother had gone through a crisis or not, the fact remained. She had hidden the bodies of 4 babies for 20 years. That was something unforgivable. But the most outrageous part was the sentence she received. Despite keeping the bodies of her own children hidden for 20 years, Bernadette Quirk did not serve a single day in prison. Instead, she was sentenced to just 2 years of community service, as the court deemed the deaths to be accidental stillbirths rather than intentional homicide. Jo.e.n couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mother had robbed 4 innocent babies of their lives, yet she faced no real consequences. After the trial, Jo.e.n and her sister Kath decided to hold a cremation for the 4 lost infants. It was the only thing they could do to try and make amends for the horrors their mother had committed. Jo.e.n invited her mother to the ceremony, but Bernadette did not attend. Jo.e.n wasn't sure why, but by then, it no longer mattered. In the months that followed, when the dust had settled, Jo.e.n decided to write down her story. She began working on her book, Silent Sisters, a brutally honest account of her childhood and the forgotten babies her mother had abandoned. The book wasn't just an expose, it was Jo.e.n's way of freeing herself from the shadows of the past. Her story sent shockwaves across Britain, igniting nationwide debates about parental responsibility and the failures of the social system. In February 2019, Bernadette Quirk passed away after a long battle with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. For Jo.e.n, her mother's death brought no sorrow, only relief. Honestly, I feel relieved that my mother is gone. I don't feel sad, though I sympathize with my family, Jo.e.n admitted. She could never forgive her mother, not just for her crimes, but for never telling her the truth. But the one thing that gives me peace is that finally, those babies have been set free. They are no longer trapped in that container forever. Years have passed since this case, but its echoes remain, not only in British society, but across the world. This video comes to an end here. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping true crime stories.